Gukesh blunders against Richard Rapport, costing him this match. So Gukesh start with the white pieces and Richard with the black pieces. So it's a Karakhan defense, the exchange variation of the Karakhan. Bishop attacks the queen, queen to b3, pawn push. It's the bishop, bishop goes to h5. Knight e2, knight c6 now. Bishop attacks the queen, queen to d7. So after 10 moves, the position is equal, and Gukesh goes for castling on the king side. Bishop d6 by Richard, attacking this nicely played dark square bishop. So Gukesh goes for the trade, and he brings his knight to g3 now, attacking the light square bishop of Richard. So he goes for bishop g6, and Gukesh goes for the capture, and Richard captures with his hedge pawn, opening up the rook, allowing granting him access to the king area immediately. So and now after castling on the queen side, we have a new game, and this is going to be a very attacking game for black, particularly due to this open h file. So Gukesh brings his queen back to d1, and knight to e4. Had to capture that particular knight, and pawn captures back with an attack on the knight. But a knight move is played, but best move was to bring the queen up. So pawn push to f5 is forms this pawn formation, even though this double pawn in both the d file and e files. With this pawn push, Richard took care of that particular issue. So queen e2, and he again pushes the pawn to e5, and after 20 moves, the position is still equal, even though black have got an attack going. So g5 now, with the castling on the opposite side, Richard can simply push the pawns and form more and more pressure. The position favors black slightly. Knight b3 by Gukesh, but best move was pushing pawn to f3. So he goes for the capture, and pawn recaptures. King moves away to b8 from this open c file, and Gukesh can launch a counter attack by bringing his rooks to the c file, and he bring rook to c1 and knight to b4, knight c5, using that pawn as an outpost, allowing the capture of the pawn on e3. So after the queen trade, so Gukesh probably wondering whether to capture with the rook or with the pawn. The pawn forms this pawn structure, and he captures with the pawn, which allows Richard to capture this pawn here. But he captures the pawn, but the knight is kind of don't have anywhere else to go. These squares, only this square is left, and Gukesh exploit that and get an advantage. He brings his rook with the idea this knight cannot retrieve, but immediately this pawn push and the rook had to go back. Knight comes back in. So great game by Richard. He pushes his pawn. Rook to a1 again. Rook d6. Bringing his rooks up the board. Rook a3 by Gukesh. Knight d5. So the knight cannot come to d6 here, black knight, because of the knight on d5. King f1, but best was to push the pawn. Pawn push attacks the rook and the rook goes up. He plays this in between move with a check. King comes up, knight goes and attacks the supports the rook, and pawn push hits the knight. But knight covers it. Covers the attack on the rook. So the rook, black rook is safe. Pushes d4. And now Richard is better. He pushes here, the pawn here. So the idea is that if you capture, the rook will capture with the check. And another pawn push is coming. Check. King drop back. And he pushes the pawn away from the attack of the rook and the pawn. King goes to safety. This pawn is grabbed now by Richard, not allowing the white rook to infiltrate black camp. Gukesh is down to 6 seconds on the clock. Richard got a lot of time. Brings the king up. Rook d5. Rook a5 protecting the knight. So 8. So this knight on b6 is under attack. Richard taking his time. He brings his knight back to c8. Rook comes, supporting the knight now. And the knight moves, and basically this is game over because he's captured. It's a blunder by Gukesh, and Richard Rapport wins this match. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more such videos.